And we're live.
We're live, yes. We're gonna be two by the end of it, I suspect, because we're at such an odd time for everyone else. But for whoever joins, maybe there's a few people in Asia. Oh, we have Anatoly and Jennifer. Nice. Hello. Welcome to Me Time with Suzanne Noble. I invited Suzanne today because she used to be a publicist, and I've been inspired by some posts and notes that you've shared where you basically were mentioning that your publication was mentioned in the media and things like that, and I feel like we could learn so much from you, Suzanne. So welcome and thank you for accepting the invitation.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here. And it's so funny that we're both in Thailand. So yeah, small world. I'm in one place, you're in another. But yeah, I mean, I was a publicist for over 20 years and I ran quite a successful PR agency. And when I stopped doing PR for other people, I started doing PR for myself. And I realized that actually PR is a great way, amongst the many ways that we can take advantage of what's out there to generate publicity for ourselves. And in this case, we're talking about for our Substacks. And I have been very successful at creating publicity, articles in newspapers, been on a BBC documentary about sex over 60, and loads and loads and loads of women's magazines with quite significant frequency since I started doing this about 3 years ago. I mean, to be honest, the growth of this was my own channel, Sex Advice for Seniors, was in part due to some fantastic timing. And so much of publicity is about really great timing because you really need to hop on stories when they happen and not wait. I think that's one of my really big takeaways from when I was a publicist was that I would get incredibly frustrated with my clients who would not seize the opportunity that I had presented in front of them to get more publicity for their product or their service. They'd be like, oh, I'm really busy. I'll phone that journalist up tomorrow. And I'd be like, no, it's not about tomorrow. It's about right now, because journalists have busy lives. They're often on very tight deadlines. And the one thing I would say is that if you do find a journalist that's interested in talking to you about what you're writing about, don't wait to get in contact with them. You really need to be on it. And because the first person is basically the person that often enough gets the opportunity. And people who are not on it don't get the opportunity. So I think that's one of the big takeaways for me is that you really do have to seize the opportunity when it presents itself. And so much of what I've achieved has just been because I saw something, I wrote to someone immediately, they responded, said, this sounds great. And then I gave them back what they wanted. And I think that's the second point for me is that you have to give them what they want. It's not about what you want, it's about what they want. So often journalists will post in various places. There's Facebook groups where journalists are reaching out for spokespeople. X is another big one, x.com. There's something called Help a Reporter Out, which is shortcutted to Harrow with a hashtag on X. And people will be looking for case studies, all different types of case studies. And they'll be looking for people with your area of expertise. And so what you don't want to do is write them a whole big long essay. You literally just want to write them a few lines. It says, look, I saw what you posted and I fit your description exactly. Here's 3 sentences about me. If this interests you, let me know. And that's it. Like, don't give them a whole big, long diatribe about how amazing you are, because they just are not going to be interested in reading that.
And they might be scared to invite you on if it's a live interview because they're going to be scared. Maybe you're going to just talk ears off and not really focus on those 2 minutes that you might have in the limelight or in the spotlight.
Totally, completely.
Suzanne, because your public... has such a great angle, right? It has such a specific and kind of okay, it's not sensational, because let's hope everyone has sex beyond 60s, right? But it kind of is viewed in a manner that's like amazing. Oh my god, people over 60 have sex and need to, I don't know,
Yeah.
make some adjustments because, hips hurt, things are not as lubricated, so on and so forth. But for publications that where we feel like we don't really have this amazing angle, or I don't know, sensational thing, how can we grab or spot that moment that can interest a journalist or a publicist or someone to kind of team up and work together?
Yeah, I mean, I always think tangentially. So, whilst they might not be interested in specifically what it is you are writing about, think about the other aspects of your life that might be of interest. So, for instance, you're a woman, you're combining your career with, raising a family, you're pregnant at the moment. And it's kind of like, what is it, how do you juggle, right? Like, how do you juggle as a working woman with a solo career who is expecting a child? It's a great human interest story. People are often interested in, like, how do women go, make it on their own, right? We know, especially these days, what are the opportunities that are out there to generate an income outside of just going into an office. So, um, so it's so it may be a story about, how I left my big corporate job to set up a publication that now helps solopreneurs navigate the legal aspects of social media platforms, for example, right?
I'm gonna quote
Um,
you on that. It's very good. I'm gonna copy that text. Um, like, I'm gonna give you an example, and you tell me if I kind of missed the train on that. So this spring, there was everywhere in the news that Copenhagen is back as the happiest place in the world, or something like that, the best city to live in. Um,
yeah,
live in Copenhagen, and I have my hot take on it. And I was thinking about it because I think people think, oh, if I move into the happiest place in the world, I'm going to be the happiest, or something like that. The happiness will just brush up on me, and I'm just gonna exude anything. And I just saw an article a while back saying, "Oh, I moved back after 2 years from Copenhagen and I hated it," and blah blah blah. And I'm like, and then I was seeing on Substack around that time some ladies that got published into the Guardian and other things about my experience visiting Copenhagen, and I'm like, but I live here. How do I get in touch with them? So I probably missed the train on it, maybe a little bit. Well, like, is that kind of what you were talking about, seizing the moment?
yeah, absolutely. And I'd say that often people see a story and then they think, oh, I've got a similar story to that. I'm just going to repeat that somewhere else. And what's interesting about what you suggested is the fact that you've got a completely different angle on it. So it's probably not about going back to the Guardian, because the Guardian's already done that, but thinking if there's another publication that might be curious or interested in that. I actually did have an article picked up for the Telegraph, asked to write an article on the Telegraph from a note that I published that said, that was just talking about my relationship. And I got paid for that article, which was great. But I would say, is there another is there like would you go, for example, in the UK to something like the Telegraph with an article like that? And again, it has to be quick, because if something like that comes out and it generates a bit of a buzz, they're going to want to see that within the next few days, because otherwise it's dead. So, you see that, you think, here's five, you write, your copy line is 5 reasons why Copenhagen's not all it's cracked up to be, right?
Yeah, so
And
you don't have the article fully ready, right? Do you just
no,
yeah.
No, you say, I've been a Copenhagen resident now for the past 20 years, and I saw this article about blah, 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 blah. And while it may be true that, some people here are happy, here's 5 reasons that make it not so great a place to live, right? So,
Like the weather. Here I am in
like,
Thailand.
yeah, exactly. Like I met somebody from Copenhagen here at I'm doing Muay Thai, my boxing class, and there's a kid here from Denmark, from Copenhagen, who's come with his family so he can work out here. But yeah, I mean, it's about seizing the moment with those stories and going to another publication that hasn't already run the same story and saying, here's another on it. So I think that's a really good idea. And often, if you want to know where you can find the addresses of those journalists, because that's the next thing that's really difficult, is like, well, how do I find them? I have, over the past few years, found that X is a really good way to find people, by just literally putting in the search engine either the publication that you would like to go to, and put it under, and then look under the people section. When you put it through search, it'll tell you all the people that work for that publication who are on X. And either you can send them a direct message through X, or often enough, they have their email address within biography. So that's another opportunity to go and find them. And I would say that I've used that as a really successful way of tracking down journalists. Sometimes they're on LinkedIn as well, and you can contact them via LinkedIn sometimes, although I'd say that generally, and I haven't looked at Blue Sky, but I would say look at those sorts of platforms, where media is often hanging out. And for me, for a long time, it was Twitter, now X. So I think it's probably still a pretty good place to go and just try and see if you can track down some email addresses.
Yeah. And write to a few people, I assume, is the next, or just one?
I wouldn't go too crazy, because, you don't want 5 people coming back and saying yes to you, although that would be a lovely position to be in. But, typically I would, yeah, I mean, 5 is probably about the right number. Sometimes I just try and go to somebody that I think is absolutely gonna be the right publication.
Mm. Do you and it's not like you always know the person, you just reach out through X,
Yeah, I
right?
mean, I definitely don't know them. I would
Mm,
say the other thing as well is to know what sections do what. So, for example, features tends to be longer articles, right? They're feature stories. So the why Copenhagen is the best place in the world is most likely going to be with the features editor. They're the person that is going to have commissioned that article, and they're going to run that. If, on the other hand, it's, a bomb just exploded in down the street or something, that's news, right? Sometimes news will pick up stuff that's feature led, especially if it's attached to something like a survey. So if you've got a survey that you've run and the survey's got a bunch of results, then typically I would go to the news editor with that survey, not the features editor. Um, but but you might want to write to features and news, because sometimes there's a bit of a crossover with that. So I would say, but you don't. I would say it's probably not right, for example, for the travel editor, because the travel editor wants positive stories about going to visit places.
mhm.
They don't want shocking negative stories about going to places, because their whole job is to incentivize people to go and visit other places. So typically they would write the 5 reasons why Copenhagen is great. That would be the travel editor might write that because it's encouraging people to go to Copenhagen, but they probably wouldn't write 5 reasons why Copenhagen sucks. That
Yeah.
might be that might be off the back of the survey that said Copenhagen is great. Here's 5 reasons why Copenhagen sucks. That might be features or it might be news.
Mm,
So it's also about knowing who runs what.
yeah. And hopefully maybe they talk amongst, one another, the editors, but who knows? We
No,
cannot.
they don't.
No. And do they compete with one another, for stories, or they're just too busy to.
No, they don't normally talk to one another. So people work in features, and people work in news, work in news. They don't normally cross over. They don't sit around the table like everybody that works in the newspaper and
Mm.
discuss what they're going to run.
That's the myth, right? That's what we see in the TV shows about news,
Yeah.
media and whatever. There's always the room, and everyone's in the room, and everyone's like pitching. We're like, okay. So, I'm already getting so much good information. I was telling Suzanne before we joined that I'm going to take note. It's a live that's selfishly for me to learn how to promote my publication if the opportunity comes, beyond Substack, and hoping that the notes river is good to us that day. For me, it hasn't been for a year. So here we are. If you have questions for Suzanne, put it in the chat and I'll keep an eye on it and ask away. Suzanne, apart from published media, what other type, like websites, could that also work? Podcasts, what else do you have in your PR bag to tell us about?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that podcasts are a really great way as well. I've been on loads and loads of podcasts, and there's a few ways to get guests to become a guest on a podcast. There's a couple of platforms. There's one in the US, it's also in the UK, called Quoted, QWOTED. And it's a platform where you can promote yourself either as a guest or somebody looking for guests. So you put a bio out there. There's also an opportunity on Quoted to look at what journalists are searching for with regard to case studies. So that's another good place to look. In the UK, we've got something called Newspage, which is another platform where they post out inquiries for people with all different types of expertise looking for case studies for mainly print media. With regard to podcasts, there's a platform called matchmaker.fm. And there's a few kind of podcast matching platforms. Some of them are free to join. I think I didn't pay to join Matchmaker. And you can search for people who you want on your podcast. And again, you can also present yourself as a guest. There's a few of those different types of platform. In the UK, we have something called Response Source. It's a paid for service where journalists post looking for case studies, and it's often used by companies as well as individuals who've got the budget to be able to find opportunities to speak with journalists. So there's quite a few places like that. And you can just reach out to podcasts yourself. Through normally they'll have like an inquiry form where you can just fill in and pitch yourself as a guest. I would say start aiming fairly low to start with. You know, you don't want to like call up Diary of a CEO, for example, as your first thing. But you know, you can definitely find smaller podcasts that are looking for guests. There are Facebook pages. There are Facebook pages where it's like find a guest, and there's a Facebook group called Lightbulb that's used a lot in the UK to find mainly press opportunities, but also some radio as well. And radio is another place. I mean, the other thing I always say to people is that you would be surprised at what journalists consider to be newsworthy. And often the best place to start is actually just looking at your own local newspaper or your own local radio station. Because if you've achieved anything on Substack, for example, or you've won an award, or you've become a bestseller, or something, you might find that your local newspaper is really interested in that. And it's and normally I would say about the local newspaper is they're nice people. Um, Media people can sometimes be a bit hard to deal with because they're, you know, they're working to these deadlines, and sometimes they really don't have a lot of time, and they can come across sometimes as rude. Um, and typically, local media are really looking for stories. They're looking for things that are happening locally. So, if you've got an event happening locally, if you've achieved some recognition that you'd like to announce, We recently had our Advantages of Age Awards, and one of our winners, which was the Substack winner, actually, for the Best Pro Aging Substack. She's now been covered in her local newspaper for winning that award. And she's also had her local counselor reach out and send her a letter to say how impressed she is with that. And I was like, wow, I mean, we're not grummies or anything, but I thought that it was great that she capitalized on that opportunity that she had having won that award.
Yeah, and people don't know how to reach out to you. They don't know what everyone is dealing with. And actually, we need to be proactive about it. And I have a question on the chat from Shemaya. And I know she's a designer. And she wrote, but would PR, and I guess also journalists, really work if you're just starting out in your publication and business, so you don't have that many accolades to showcase? Do we think about the human angle then? Because I know Shemaya was saying that she's on the spectrum, for example. So starting your own business, being on the spectrum, being a designer,
Yeah.
having to deal with people. How do you deal with that? Maybe that's kind of what is coming to me as you're kind of giving us the tips. But what do you think?
Yeah, and I think, being a neurodiverse woman starting off on her own is a nice angle. I mean, it's not really about the numbers. I would say that often it's not really about the numbers. When I started my podcast, I had one episode, and it was a film that came out called Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, with what's her face anyway. And she's just completely slipped my head. Emma Thompson. And she was a 61-year-old woman who was, looking at having her first orgasm with a man because she'd never had it during her marriage. And at the time, the media were looking for 61-year-old women who were talking about sex. And me and Peter, who I was doing my podcast with at the time, had one episode. We'd literally just started. We had one episode. And
That's a
they
great time.
and they reached out to me and said, "Wait a minute, like, you've got this sex advice for seniors thing. You're 61, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah." And they said, "Can we interview you?" I said, "But I've only got one episode." And they said, "It doesn't matter because you've got one." That was it.
Or the
I
one.
just I fit the bill, and we got so much publicity, and off the back of that publicity, we got, the subscribers on Substack and loads of downloads, and the thing just blew up. It really took off, but always joke that we only had one episode. So sometimes it's just going back to what I said before. It's about seizing the moment. There was this great opportunity, this 61-year-old woman who was going on this sexual journey. And I was a 61-year-old woman who was on a sexual journey, I suppose. So, yeah,
And podcasting about it.
podcasting about it. Yeah. I mean, with one episode, there was like nothing there, nothing, but it didn't matter. So I would say never think that, your numbers aren't significant enough. You haven't done enough. Honestly, you could have one post. And if your story is strong enough, then that's good enough.
So jump on it is the main advice. You see
And then,
something where you feel like you have an angle or something to add, find on Twitter or X, whatever it's called, X, the journalist in a publication that would be interested in maybe running a different angle on kind of what other publications are doing, and just try, right? Don't discard yourself before the journalists themselves say no to you or don't answer or whatever. Because, like,
yeah.
what's the worst that can happen? That you don't hear back from them? That's okay, because you're pitching. You're not writing full articles, spending 7 million hours and then being disappointed. And by the time you finished your article, like, the story is kind of half over because someone attacked some country or I don't know what, and nobody wants to talk about sex advice for seniors or me
Yeah.
time or anything,
Yeah.
more hygge, more fun. So yeah, what
I
have
have another suggestion as well that I think that has always worked for me in the past, which is around collaboration. Because often, like when Shemaya was talking about being neurodiverse and being a designer and setting up her Substack, my immediate thought was, is there someone else who is known for being neurodiverse, who's been in the media recently that you could piggyback your own experience of neurodiversity in the workplace to talk about? That's the one thing. The second thing is, are there two other people? The media love the power of three, I always call it. So often when you see them talking about a story that's in relation to entrepreneurs, they always use three different examples. So rather than them going off and find them, can you bring them two other examples of people who are doing interesting things so that you can say that there is, for instance, with my other hat on, which is with my Startup School for Seniors hat on, which is a course that I deliver, probably about 20, maybe more than 20% of the people that come to our program wanting to start their own business have got some form of neurodiversity, typically something like ADHD, for example. And often what's happened is they've come into freelancing or self-employment because the workplace doesn't really know how to accommodate their neurodiversity. So they've decided that they're going to set something up for themselves that works for them and their brain, right? And it's becoming more and more common. And I'd be curious to know how many people with ADHD, for example, are freelance or self-employed. Like, is there a higher percentage of people who have got ADHD who are self-employed than people who don't have ADHD? Because I suspect that there's quite a high number of people who are on the spectrum in some way who go and find self-employment because the workplace hasn't really accommodated them in the way that they need.
Yeah, and also with going back to work mandates and things like that, where finally people that were struggling with ADHD and things like that could kind of be in their own cocoon and work and were doing their best work and finding their routine, and all of a sudden they're like, nope, you gotta go back in the office. And maybe they also moved halfway across the country, and now they're like, what do I do next? So
Exactly.
many people get pushed. And I think having this finger on what's happening in the world, like I was scrolling on Substack and I'm like, what the hell is this ICE thing? And then my husband filled me in. I'm trying to stay away a bit from news because I'm pregnant and I don't want to stress myself out. And there's too many wars happening at the moment. And
Yes.
more on the horizon, apparently. So I'm like, protect me, tell me just the absolute minimum.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, what's ice? And then he told me, and I'm like, oh, I regret finding out. But that's kind of the thing that people that can deal with it need to kind of be aware of and think, okay, for example, we had people traveling for work in the US, and they were getting their laptop seized, and they would be refused to enter unless they gave access to their laptops, but that's a breach of their employment contract and they're afraid to get fired. That's a story you can definitely pitch to a
Yeah.
journalist, coming from
Yeah,
that.
and see, that for me is like a news story, right? Because in the news at the moment, it's the fact that people are worried about traveling now. They're worried about their social media being investigated. They're worried about their laptop being seized. And if in these sorts of circumstances, how do we, if something like that were to happen to you, well, that's the first thing you do is you'd ring up the newspaper, right? And you'd say, my laptop was seized. I can't work. This is the consequence of me trying to come to this country. That's a news story. The more of a feature story is 5 ways that that you can keep yourself safe while traveling to ensure that you can actually cross borders safely and you can get into the countries that you need to get into. So do we need to wipe our social media? What do we need to do here to be able to travel safely? So I think there's stories around that as well. And again, going back to okay, it's not specifically around your Substack, what you're doing, but often the point of all of this, because obviously a lot of people are going to go, well, what's that got to do with my Substack? Why should I care about that? You know, um, it's because you're going to get what's known as a plug, right? They're going to say, Suzanne, who has a Substack called Sex Advice for Seniors, recently was not admitted to the US because of XYZ, right? So the trade-off is somebody goes, "Oh, that's interesting. I'm going to Google sex advice for seniors and see what that's all about." It's not that they're going to write specifically about that. And so a lot of what I do is not specifically related to sex advice for seniors at all. It's about the time that I visited a sex party, or it's about the time that I entered my menopause and my libido dropped through the floor, or whatever it happened to be. So don't think we want to be so myopic in how we're thinking about this. That's what I'm saying. It's like, think expansively. Like, what are all the interesting things that go on in your life every day? Like, that can potentially interest somebody, a journalist. And often it's not related to your Substack at all. It's just the fact that, you're doing things differently. I mean, I'm here in Thailand as you are, and I'm probably one of there are certainly older people here. So it's not like I'm the only digital nomad type person who's wandering around Thailand. But I would say that I have done quite a few stories about being a digital nomad in my 60s, and then they refer to what I do because it makes sense within the context of the story. So
Introduce you, who's Suzanne, right? And then that's my question. Like, if a journalist that's doing a news piece about something that's happening, let's say again, Copenhagen for me, how do I ensure that they mention that I write on Substack? When they ask me what I do, I say I'm a Substack writer, and that's kind of like you kind of give the thing that you want to promote as who you are, as your intro, to make sure that hopefully gets into the news story, instead of like, if you give them a full CV, they're gonna say
yeah, yeah. I mean,
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, look, you just have to say right out, like, I would really appreciate it if you mentioned my Substack. It's called Me Time, and this is what it is. And, so when they say, how do you want to be referred to? You say, I want to be referred to as this, who does this. And again, they're not going to give you, especially if you're doing something about the 5 things that don't make Copenhagen so great a city to live in, they're not going to give you paragraphs about your Substack.
Yeah, yeah.
So whatever it is that you're going to do, keep it really succinct. The other thing I would say which is really super important, is around images. Lots of magazines and newspapers will expect you to have a really good high resolution image that is going to fit with their publication. So have a selection of high quality images. And by high quality, we mean that they're probably going to be 3, 4, 5 megabytes in size. These are not 134 KB or whatever. These are high quality images, and either they've been professionally taken or they're of good enough quality that they can be used in a publication. So have those in a Google Drive. So if you're out doing the food shopping and somebody rings you up and says, we're just about to run this, can you send me over some pictures? You're not like, oh my God, I'm not going to be home for another 2 hours. I wasn't expecting this. I don't know what, and freak out. You just literally send them a link to your Google Drive, to your folder, and go, here you go, and carry on with your shopping. I mean,
Yeah.
the number of times people have rung me up to ask me for pictures when I'm out, and I'm like, okay. And they're all on my phone, they're all on Google Drive, so I don't worry about it.
That is such awesome advice. We're hitting the half-hour mark, just over, and I know people are trying to go back to bed. Uh, and some are trying to go about your day. So I want to ask you, as the last question, do you have anything else that comes to mind now that we've like kind of unfurled a bit the story about promoting Substack that we haven't mentioned yet?
No, I mean, as I said before, and I just think there's no time like the present. So if you see something and you think this applies to me, it does take time. I suppose that's the thing that I would always say to people, because it's another job, really. Like looking at X every day and looking for hashtags like journo request, which is a hashtag that gets used on X when people are looking for case studies. Haro, like I said before, HARO, that's another hashtag that people use. All of this sort of stuff, looking, writing, responding, sending pictures, keeping on top of things, it's another job. So if you want to appear in these publications, you have to put the work in. It's not, they're not going to come to you. So that's what I would say. It's like, you know, do the work.
And you're saying, Suzanne, that it's definitely worth it to kind of put the word out there beyond just the Substack river, that we're out here doing our thing, being amazing, and then multi-talented, I don't know, with several interests that could really inspire the people or kind of get a better or a different angle to a reality that everyone's writing about.
Yeah, I think the challenge with Substack nowadays is going to, and as the platform grows, is getting noticed. So it's one way of achieving standout without relying on just generating endless notes. Because I do think that while Substack is a great place to find other writers and for other writers to find you, it's also getting very crowded and very noisy. So I think in a way we are responsible for looking at other places that we can go to find that audience that we're looking for. And certainly reaching out to journalists and using the media is definitely one way of doing that, for sure.
And another way that you're just witnessing is doing a live with someone
Yeah.
that you have something in common with, or your buddy for some reason, because as you are live, there's little buttons that pop out all the time saying, oh, by the way, if you like Suzanne, subscribe to her publication. Or by the way, if you like Noemi and you want to learn how to Substack without burnout, subscribe to her publication or whatever. So, collaboration, showing up as a real person and not just words on the screen is so important to build that trust factor that is key when you're trying to build something that's beyond just people reading your newsletter, which is kind of the first point. But maybe you want to build a business, maybe you want to create a community, and for that you need to show up at least two-dimensionally, if not like 3D. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And guest posts, things like live is fantastic. And just as a reminder, I'm Suzanne from Sex Advice for Seniors. And if you liked what I said, then check me out.
And also because Suzanne has amazing advice on her other publication about the entrepreneurs. Suzanne is full of really good advice for entrepreneurs, for the digital nomads.
Thank
Please subscribe. You're not gonna regret it. I feel like you're the person that just gets to the subject, gives you the goodies, and we get on with the day, whilst other people can kind of just sell themselves so well. But when it comes to it, it's like, okay, maybe I got 2-3 nuggets out of it, and that's it. I feel like you just gave this whole live, and I thank you so much. So much information
I
that
know. Do you know I teach this and charge for it?
okay. So thank you so much for joining. This is going to be recorded and shared with all our subscribers. Suzanne with her people,
Yeah.
Naomi with me, with my peeps. So if you've joined and had to drop because of whatever, you're going to get it in your inbox. So you can kind of spell out all those websites Suzanne mentioned and so on. Thank you for joining us. I didn't expect to have
Thank you.
on at this time, but I'm happy we had quite a good turnout. Thank you for your time,
Yeah.
Suzanne, for your generosity.
Thank you.
It exceeded my expectations. So I'm very, very, very thankful. And please subscribe to Suzanne. And Suzanne has the best notes. Like, if you want to be entertained on Substack, go follow Suzanne at least, because you're not going to regret it. And the story about your
Thank
leg,
you.
I'm looking forward to that coming up.
It's turning into a big essay, that I'll tell you. That's turning into, I keep waking up in the middle of the night and keep writing it. Yeah, my legs. Yeah. Anyway, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining. Oh, I need to press, end or something. Haven't done this in a while. Take care.
I
Bye.
know, I don't know how to do it.